Morning, all. All right, so for Friday night, pretty busy. There's 6 games tonight in the National Hockey League. Playoff implications abound as we get closer and closer to said playoffs. And to keep in mind, the trade deadline is on Monday. So we'll see what kind of lineups we have for these teams tonight. There may be some guys getting held out. I'll have a News of the Day video up on that kind of thing soon, I would think. Anyways, we have 2 games starting at 4 o'clock Pacific, 7 o'clock Eastern. Starting with the Philadelphia Flyers in against the Ottawa Senators. So 2 teams that don't have playoff aspirations. We know that Giroux is not with the Flyers. The expectation is Giroux gets traded if he hasn't already been traded as I'm recording this. But Philadelphia now 19-30-11. They're 4-5-1 in their last 10. They won last night. Felt like part of that was probably because of Giroux. They wanted to win one for him. Away from home, 7-15-5. They're tied with New Jersey in points. They're 1 point ahead of Buffalo, and they're 2 points ahead of their opponent, Ottawa. Ottawa with a record of 21-34-5 overall. Last 10 games, they're 2-8. They've lost 3 in a row in regulation. It's been quite the steep drop-off for Ottawa from what was a pretty good run they were having. At home, they're 11-19-2. They're 2 points behind the Devils and Philadelphia. 1 point behind Buffalo and 6 points ahead of Montreal. So that's how close Montreal's making it now in terms of that race to see who ends up being at the bottom of the East. All right, 7 Eastern, 4 Pacific start time between Washington and Carolina, and I'm taking Carolina because sure, Carolina lost last night. Washington won last night. Washington's won the first 2 meetings between these teams, so it feels like Carolina's due, and they're at home. For Washington, they won on November 28th by a score of 4-2. They won by a score of 4-0 on March 3rd. These teams will meet again on March 28th. So there's 10 days from now where they meet each other a fourth and final time. Washington's 34-18-10 overall. Last 10 games, they're 6-3-1. They've won 3 in a row. They seem to be getting things together. Away from home, they're 19-7-5. They're 1 point behind Boston. They are 3 points behind the New York Rangers. On the Washington front, on the Carolina front, they are 41-14-5 last 10 games. They're 6-3-1. They've lost 2 in a row in regulation, and they're coming off that loss last night against the Toronto Maple Leafs. At home, they're 23-4-2. They're 4 points ahead of Pittsburgh. They are 6 points ahead of the Rangers, and they don't want to lose this one and then start to get concerned about first in the division if Pittsburgh keeps going on a roll. So they're going to want to win this one tonight. We'll see, though. This should be the game of the night right here. Although, the one beneath it starting at 8 o'clock Eastern, 5 o'clock Pacific, Boston and Winnipeg. That could be game of the night material as well. January 22nd, Boston wins at home 3-2. So Winnipeg likely looking for some measure of revenge here, and they're heating up. Boston 37-19-5 overall. Last 10 games, they're 7-2-1. They lost their last game. There's been some concerns when it comes to Boston holding leads and just, playing the full 60 minutes, the cliches. So that's been an issue with Boston. We'll see how things go with them and against Winnipeg. They're 19-9-3 away from home. They are 4 points behind Toronto, and they're only the 1 point ahead of Washington now for that number 1 wildcard spot. Winnipeg, 28-23-10 is their overall record. Last 10 games, they're 6-3-1. They've won 2 in a row. At home, they're 16-11-2. They're 4 points behind Vegas for that final playoff spot, 3 points behind Dallas, and 1 point behind Vancouver. So they can make up some ground on a playoff spot tonight and make things more difficult for the general manager going into Monday. This is a very important weekend for teams like Winnipeg. If you lose these games on the weekend, odds are, and I'm including Friday and the weekend, odds are you're probably going to be selling off at the deadline. At the very least, you're not a buyer. But make things difficult for the GM. Get as close to that playoff spot as possible. Make them think about it. 9 o'clock Eastern, 6 o'clock Pacific, the Buffalo Sabres in against the Calgary Flames. So what's interesting is November 18th, Calgary wins 5-0 in Buffalo. Buffalo's coming off of a 6-1 defeat last night against the Edmonton Oilers. So in both cases, games against Alberta teams that have ended in lopsided scores for said Alberta team. Can Buffalo bounce back tonight? They're 20-33-8 over their last 10 games. They're 4-6. They've lost 2 in a row. Away from home, they're 9-17-4. They're 1 point behind both Philadelphia and New Jersey. They're 1 point ahead of Ottawa. So they're right in the mix for that group although that mix is nowhere near the playoffs. But it's fun to look at where teams are in the standings. Calgary, 37, 16, and 7 overall. Last 10 games, they're 7, 2, and 1. They won their last game. At home, they're 19, 5, and 5. They're 5 points ahead of the Kings, who won last night. They are 9 points ahead of the Oilers, who also won last night. So now Calgary gets their chance to answer that and extend their lead. And then I believe tomorrow night they're playing in against the Vancouver Canucks, which is why with Vancouver losing last night against Detroit, I kind of thought to myself, this is going to be trouble. Because they're going to get Calgary in the second half of a back-to-back, sure, but they're going to get a Calgary team that they whooped the last time they played them. All right, then we get into the late starts. 10 o'clock Eastern, 7 o'clock Pacific. The Florida Panthers, who have looked very human over their last few games, in against the Anaheim Ducks, who have looked very human for the last couple of months. Florida's now 41, 14, and 6. Last 10 games, they're 6, 3, and 1. They lost in regulation last night against Vegas. Away from home, they're 15, 8, and 6. They have a 4-point lead on Tampa atop the division. They have a 5-point lead on Toronto. And yeah, this road trip has seemingly taken the wind out of their sails. I was surprised. They're a team that's known for their comebacks, and last night there really wasn't a lot there. So we'll see how things go tonight in Anaheim. The Ducks are 27, 25, and 11. Their last 10 games are 2, 6, and 2. Their last game they lost in extra time. At home, they're 16, 11, and 4. They're now 5 points behind a playoff spot, behind Vegas, and they do not have games in hand on Vegas either. This is the first of 2 meetings. They meet in Florida on April 12th. And, of course, they come in as expansion teams together. 10:30 Eastern, 7:30 Pacific start time between Colorado and the San Jose Sharks. For Colorado, they beat San Jose 6-2 on November 13th. This is the second of 3 meetings. They meet again on March 31st. So for Colorado, 43, 13, and 5 is their overall record. Last 10 games, they're 6, 3, and 1. They've won 2 in a row. Away from home, they're 19, 10, and 2. They're 14 points clear of St. Louis atop the division. For San Jose, they're 26, 26, and 8. Last 10 games, they're 4, 4, and 2. They did lose their last game in regulation, which was last night against LA. 14, 13, and 4 at home, and they were 10 points behind the Vegas Golden Knights. Now, it'd be nice, to have first half of a back-to-back and then realize the second half is against Colorado, who seem to be heating up again. So it is interesting because Colorado and Florida have very similar records. They've both gone through some kind of iffy spots over the last few weeks. I think that's just how an 82-game season works. But, yeah, so we'll see how everybody performs tonight. Let me know your winners for these games in the comment section below, as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.